tasks with TenForce. Our goal for this webinar is to present our latest module, a solution with which you can track any type of compliance task you need to track with a sophisticated tracking view and clear potential linkage to other modules in our ecosystem. If you kept up with our series in the US, you may recognize some familiar faces. My name is Adam Anderson. I will be providing a general introduction. We are also joined by Michael Heiser, who will offer up the live demonstration of the platform. Our agenda for today, a very brief history of the company. We'll be setting some stages to highlight some common challenges before we shift towards compliance management solution, the TenForce module ecosystem, to show you exactly how we address these challenges. Michael will provide us with the demonstration of the new module, which should be around 15 minutes of dense information coming your way, which is why I'm preparing the path forward first. At the end, we will answer any of your questions in the Q&A. At that point, if you wish to unmute, you can. It's sometimes easier to ask a question verbally than to write it out. So, about TenForce and PDC. Process Data Control Corp, or PDC for short, was founded in 1986 and has served enterprise customers across the US and Canada in industries such as mining, aerospace, chemical manufacturing, oil refining, electronic component manufacturing, steel manufacturing, to name a few. Clients have relied on PDC's technology and services to ensure compliance with state, local, and federal EHS regulations for almost 4 decades. TenForce, founded in 2001 with a focus on complex data management, began working in the chemical, food and beverage, and manufacturing industries as of 2007. They quickly became a disruptive force in health, safety, and quality space due to adaptability and a knack for conveying strategic requirements to end users in a digestible way. They became a staple of enterprises across the globe. In November 2021, PDC joined TenForce to strengthen its presence in North America. PDC's robust capabilities in air emission management, environmental sustainability reporting, B Corp certification, hazard waste compliance complemented the existing TenForce portfolio in the domains of Industry 4.0, artificial intelligence, and machine learning to create a comprehensive EHSQ and regulatory compliance solution. Both companies are better equipped to continue serving our customers and offer access to a more comprehensive portfolio of EHSQ software solutions. We are happy to share the latest development in this collaboration today. Compliance management is likely one of the most challenging workflows in business management. It impacts the whole of the business, and it requires investiture of multiple people on multiple levels of your organization. Need only mention fluctuating views on OSHA or EPA requirements with the changing administrations, and I'm sure I'll get a sigh from at least some of you. Legal obligations tend to change, become stricter or more lenient throughout the years, and each change or new introduction requires companies to adapt. Multiply this per state or country your business is operating in, or multiply it with how you operate, or even what you produce, and I don't think more need be said. We thought of a way to present compliance management that would make sense for what you will see and hear in this webinar today, and this is what we came up with. I'd like to introduce you to the simplified version of what compliance management means. This representation might look a bit strange at first glance, but allows me to highlight the ways in which our solution can help you forward with compliance management. Bear with me while I go through this. So any country or region you operate in comes with legal obligations towards or against which you must organize. They determine what you must implement and what you must disclose. Each of those obligations should end up as an internal policy for your company to follow, which facilitate operations to continue. The idea behind a policy is above all to educate and guide, to put in place procedures that help to manage a particular identified risk, legal or otherwise, and to write all of that down so you can prove it later. With this in place, enter what we would call a compliance state. In order to keep this state, you will need to set up procedures internally that fit into your policies. These procedures can encompass quite a few different goals: controls of action, controls of reports, control of documentation. They center around finances, health and safety, quality, operational risk, due diligence, and much, much more. When it comes down to it, you end up monitoring against an external or internal standard, performing audits, inspecting, following up on observations, and reporting on what you find. We would call these the compliance processes. Both policies and processes feed into one another since logically the processes belong to the policies that lead towards a state of compliance for any given company. The processes deliver the data you need to prove you're compliant. Now, this sounds like a strange abstraction, so let me make my point more clear by rephrasing it a bit. Any one obligation you have as a company, any requirement you need to fulfill, will always result in an exponentially larger number of tasks that need to be performed. For example, a requirement to perform regular inspections across your facilities, you probably only need to report on this once a year, or maybe even just keep this information on hand. But the number of inspections you need to perform related to that requirement is always higher on a monthly basis times your number of facilities. That's why we built our compliance management solution to help you manage those compliance tasks based on the compliance requirements you need to meet. Naturally, this isn't a system that can just be set up and managed at the snap of a finger. In fact, this type of management comes with a very few clear challenges that aren't confined to just strict regulations. I don't really want to drone on about how bad things are for anyone involved in compliance, to be clear, but I hope this shows that your issues are heard, seen, and focused on. So first, we have a volume of requirements. I believe it's undeniable that your company is faced with a large amount of data points that need to be managed, controlled, collected, and analyzed for improvement. Figuring out what you need to be compliant with is already enough of a challenge, right? The segmentation in requirements and obligations is becoming more and more challenging as well, mostly because recent legal frameworks have begun to meld together different laws and frameworks, and CSRD, EPA, OSHA requirements likely the best example. Although there are reforms on the way, we already form what I've heard, there is a light at the end of the tunnel. The required level of expertise for each obligation is also increasing. Naturally, the number of requirements reflects negatively on the number of tasks they generate from different teams in your business, as I illustrated before. And the more tasks and follow-up required, the harder it becomes. And what if you find a nonconformity? How easy is it to register this, follow up on it, and follow up on whether it was resolved? Then recurrence issues may ring very familiar as well. Doing something over and over, how do you keep track of this? How do you ensure ownership for this task with the shifting workforce? Finally, compounded by all the preceding challenges, notifications. How do you inform employees specific tasks need to be completed by a certain date? How do you notify the person who needs to notify another to perform something? Noncompliance is, of course, a dangerous risk to take. In essence, you could choose not to comply with requirements that don't need to be reported yet. But the moment anything goes amiss, that's where the trouble begins. I think everyone attending knows the risks involved here today, and I don't need to spell them out. There are risks that exist on all levels of operation of a company, digital infrastructure, employee policies, training, financial, quality, safety, social responsibility. Non-compliance can mean very negative effects on the company, but enough with the doom and gloom. It's probably best to have a clear follow-up in place for the requirements you're supposed to meet. That's where we can help. TenForce is a supremely scalable and flexible tool. We offer modules, pre-configured packages that can continue to build on to match your business requirements. TenForce Compliance Management is our latest offering within this module space. So what does compliance management entail? You may be asking. Our aim is to enable clear scheduling, tracking, and easy reporting towards any compliance requirement. With this module, you'll be able to manage and track all your compliance needs in whatever way you wish to define them. You can tie tasks to your requirements, enabling you to see which requirements might need a bit more attention when a task becomes overdue. With customizable reminders, you can ensure action holders are always, at the very least, notified in advance. It should keep in helping everything move forward. With an optimized calendar view in place, we can show you exactly what status is where. And naturally, we offer integrations both with other TenForce modules or with external providers. For example, we can integrate with Inhesa, a regulatory content provider. Now, before we dive into the end of the demonstration, I want to quickly highlight how this module works exactly, since this will clearly help you understand what is happening on the screen later. Here we created a high-level overview of the compliance management process and some of the underlying data that goes into the module. At the top, we see the process itself. Any compliance requirement moves from the initial status undetermined towards compliant over action required. Action required is triggered via automations from either an external partner platform or from within the TenForce application. For example, if a task becomes overdue, it will show that action needs to be taken. The final state of a compliance requirement is called close, which means the requirement is no longer applicable. Underneath the process, there's the meat and bones of the module, actual details and data you'll be working with. The main elements here are the recurring tasks. These are the tasks connected to one compliance requirement that you need to perform. These tasks are set up via a task definition. Task definitions can be considered like settings for recurring task patterns. It informs the task you link to a compliance requirement with a ton of information, a category, an activity type, linked regulatory obligations, recurrence information, notification settings, action holders, and more. The task definition is, in effect, the link between compliance requirements and the tasks that belong to that requirement. All of this information feeds into our calendar view, which shows an easy-to-read color coding of what needs attention. Besides this, we have a ton of company information that can come from what we call shared data in the TenForce application. This is information such as which site the flow should follow or which department is directly involved. With this package, you should be able to track any type of requirement since our application can manage any type of information. Naturally, this module can tie into a larger ecosystem. The ecosystem can be built up in multiple ways with multiple connections. What I present here is an example of some of the logical links we can create. This is important because you will see some of this in our demonstration. However, for a deeper dive into these connected modules and more, we invite you to visit our library on the website. We'll paste a link in the chat for you to visit that after the webinar. So here we receive our compliance requirements, whether it be from a third-party provider. The requirements can automatically be identified as non-compliant. We can feed that into our Corrective and Preventive Action module. As we are assigning the tasks, we can connect to an audit or an inspection module within the ecosystem. And if documentation needs to be provided or updated regularly based on the compliance requirement, we can also connect to our document management module. Let me link this back to how I started this webinar. The way in which the ecosystem flows actually matches the compliance state versus the compliance process I mentioned before. The bulk of the tasks lies in what you need to perform, whereas the state of compliance can be tracked via the compliance requirements. Without further ado, I can hand it over to my partner, Michael. He can take it over for the live demonstration.
Thank you, Adam.
Michael?
Hi, everyone. Appreciate you guys joining us today. Right now, what I'm going to do is just kind of give you, from a platform standpoint, just kind of give you the lay of the land, and then I'll get into the demonstration. So the first part right here, what you're seeing is depending on who you are and depending on what rights you have is depending on your landing into the portal. So when you log into the portal, depending on who you are and based on your rights, you'll be able to say certain things. For example, for upper management, they usually like to look at advanced analytics. And from advanced analytics, we not only have our own robust reporting, but we also integrate with other Power BI tools, such as Microsoft Power BI. And for example, here, typical Power BI, you come in here, you basically select your different types of dates that you're looking for, whatever you're filtering on, you're basically dwindling it down to exactly what you're looking for. From a compliance standpoint, sometimes a lot of the customers or prospects, what they look for is based on the inspections, based on the compliant questions, which ones have failed and which ones have actually passed. And in here, for example, there's many ways that you can do this, but for this example, I can dwindle down and see the top 5 questions that have failed. Not only have they failed, but I can look at, for example, what branch or what plant has failed into those compliances. The main thing about the Power BI and TenForce, we do have a single sign-on. It's actually integrated into our portal. But the main part about it is we actually can drill down into that record into TenForce. The other part too is most of the people, if you log in, usually what they will see is our welcome page. And what that means is they go into this portal, and in here they'll have a search capability. So if they're searching throughout their site for certain information, such as a character or numeric, they can type in. And what that will do is provide you a list of items that they're exactly searching for. Down here, you'll have different shortcuts, and these are different types of shortcuts, whether they're reports and things that we call collections or customized reports that you look into. And we also have different icons up here that stay consistent throughout, no matter what module you have or no matter what screen area that you're in. For example, if I want to be notified, is there a question? Okay. So based on, depending on what you're looking for, I can be notified via when I log into the portal, or I can be notified via an email, depending on what you guys would want. In here, we also have different types of tutorials. I can easily select a tutorial and it walks me through that module that I'm looking at. Also, as I indicated, we have, for example, from a task standpoint, since I am logged in as an administrator, I am logged in as prompt administrator, I'm able to see everything within my organization. Versus if somebody else logs in, they would only see just their pertinent information they have access to. And here, one of the things that I like about TenForce is not only you have this uniform or absolute, so you always will have these icons within your reports, but you also have this different formats that you can look at these reports as. For example, I'm looking at, for example, title, task, activity type. So as I make that selection, I have that in order. I can easily delete or move things around. And then basically once I'm done, I can save and it would modify based on how I want to look at that. We also have filters. So in other words, if I click on the filters, I can easily at any of the columns, I can select what exactly I want to look at. As I talked about our robust reporting piece, we also have, right now we're looking at a tree view, but we have other formats that we can view things at. For example, if I just want to look at as a calendar, or I want to be pushed into my Outlook, maybe I have Outlook, I can push this information out there. And then they have color coding, meaning that if it's in red, obviously it's late, things that are due now. And as if I move forward, I can quickly see anything that's due in the future. So just different ways of looking at your report, different ways of looking at some type of activity that needs to take care of. We also have other ones. One of my favorites is the graph standpoint. Any of these graphs, I can add additional column in there, and it would add additional pie chart right here that you're looking at. And not only can I look at this, but I can drill down into that information depending on what I need to see at that time. I'll just show one more. We also have pivotal tables. So if you're familiar with Excel pivotal table, same concept. Right now, I can look at it in different formats. So in other words, I can do a bar chart, stacked bar chart, depending on what you're looking at. And just like in Excel, I can easily move these columns around depending on how I want to look at it. For example, if I'm looking at, for example, let's just say the priority, for example, I don't want to see the mediums. I apply that. Now I'm completely looking at a different report, and then I can drill down into that information. If I want to look at other reports, for example, I can come in here and select, for example, I want to look at the compliance requirements. And in here, staying consistent, I'm now in the compliance requirement, but now I'm looking at the group view. And in the group view, I have it grouped by compliance category. And then I have the reports, same information, just a different way of formatting the way you look at the information. And in here, I can easily look at different reports. So as an administrator, I can look at my team all together, or an individual, I just might be able to see what I have access to. In here, as Adam indicated, we actually have third-party information that can be ingested into TenForce. So in other words, all this information can be populated into the system, or you can do it manually, meaning I can come up here, open up a form, put in a title, put in the question, and then put in the category and other information. So saving typing, I went ahead and typed in a lot of this information in here. So this example is just taking a soil sample. And from that point, it's asking if you're compliant. So I can come in here, make that selection. Is this compliant, or just make an observation? All these fields in here can be customized. We have a light GUI interface. And what that means is basically, if I want to change the name or if I want to add some additional fields, I can easily do that within the form. We also have different attachments. So if I want to have documents or taking a picture, so we not only do it on the browser, but we can also have a mobile device. So I can go over to that site and take a picture and document that information and then attach it here. If it is non-conformant, so if there's a non-conformity, we also have a full-fledged correction and preventive action module. So based on that particular item, I could actually create a non-conformity. We would love to show that to you guys, but on this iteration, we're just going to kind of bypass that, but just know that we have that capability. And then from that point, there would be a button as you select the definition of the compliant task. And from that point, it's asking you, what tasks do you want to set? What definitions do you want to set? So it's asking you basically provide a title, provide a priority of this. And then here's the key part right here. So not only are we have a default from an inspection or an audit or report, but based on your business needs, you could have additional items depending on what kind of tasks need to take place. So for this example, I'm just going to say we're going to take a sample of the soil. And then the category that we're going to select is probably environmental. We want to make sure that we're compliant with the OSHA. And is it regulatory obligation? Yes, it is. And then you actually select the areas that you have, but not only select the areas that you want to focus on, but in the back end, we also have, I think it's hazard. So any risk that you're taking from that particular area that you're selecting. So once you make that selection, you also you can go down granular down to the department to the functional location if you wanted to. So we'll come in here, once again, make that selection. And now you've created a record. So once that comes back up, now we're looking at the record. We're looking at completes. There might be some additional fields that we want to make selections to. So we know it's priority medium. We know that we have selected the task that's going to be samples. And then we have the category for environmental. And then if there's anything additional that you want to add, for example, if you have regulatory requirements, for this example, let's just say you have more than a couple of acres, maybe you want to do the NPDES permit, or you could have other fields in there. So those, as we install this product into your system, we would use your business logic, your business values that you basically want in here. So just know that this is a starter pack from a starter pack, which means it's basically that you're getting the best practices from other corporations that we incorporated into this module. So we can obviously modify based on what your needs are. And then from that point, there's other things that you can put in, for example, compliance type. We want to make it actionable. We already have that information. And then based on who's the task holder that you want to send this to. So we'll send it to Luca. And then you provide a description. We'll just type in some of these fields, you can make it required, and others that you don't have to make it required. For example, if you want to notify other people, so notify via an email or when they log into the portal, there are certain items that they need to take care of or be notified, you make that selection. So right now, that's all we're doing is doing a task definition and how often do we want to send this out. And in here, depending on how often you want to send it, let's just say we want to do it once a month. And we also want to set it for a full year. So as I come in here, make these selections, and I'm going to change it to 2026 for the 11th. And what you'll see down here is the maximum number of occurrences this will occur. Let's just say I said daily. I can also make options in here saying exclude the weekends. So what that will do is none of the weekends will be sent out, but Monday through Friday, you will have that information. You can also choose who's this going to be assigned to. So right now it's Brom, but I could easily come in here and select somebody else, depending on how you want it structured. If it's always a group or if it's a certain person, you can make it where they can't make those changes. So in here, if I go back up to the top, you'll notice I have a tab up here called Task with 0. And once I click on Schedule Task, now I have 12 tasks that are assigned to a certain person. I assigned it to Luca. So as Luca would receive this information, he would receive it via an email, or he would receive it via when he logs into the portal, noting that he has some type of activity or something to be notified by. I'm going to select over to Luca. So I'm signed in as Luca. So a couple things you'll see is, one, you'll see that he has less information than Brom did, the administrator. So there are only certain items. So you can make this as simple as an easy button. So I only have one shortcut. I click on it. What are those tasks assigned to me? As I make that selection, what will come back is a report. And depending on how he has this formatted, I can see what I'm responsible for. So in other words, I can see I have on Monday, I have these are past due, Tuesday are past due, so I'm behind, and what's due today. I can also, as I indicated, I can be notified. So I can come up here from Luca. I log into the portal. I can see what items that I'm assigned to and then make that selection as well. So there's different ways that your line workers or the information that you're sending out to people to do the action and how they get that information. So if I'm just looking at, for example, the actions assigned to me, I come in here, once again, a shortcut, I go in there and I make that selection, and then I can accept or I can notify. And once I click on a button saying I want to complete this and move forward, and what happens is basically, depending on how you guys want it structured, it goes to the manager. The manager either says redo or approves that information. So I'm going to go back in here to the audit. Basically, this is what Luca would see. He would say start task. If there's information that he needs to put in here, such as an attachment, he could easily come in here and make that selection. He could do a document, so there could be multiple documents in here if you wanted to. These folks are being notified, and then he would finish that task and basically provide a date and any information that he needs to do. In the back end, what's nice about TenForce is we also have a hierarchy of breadcrumbs. And what that means is when you're drilling down into certain fields, you know where you started and where you currently are at. So in other words, I'm at this location right now, from a compliance management task to the definitions, and I want to go all the way back to the original record itself. There's other ways that you can look at this information. So we talked about the different tasks that you can select from. For example, if I'm looking at this information, I want to look at, let's just say firefighting, excuse me. From this standpoint, let's just say this was a compliance from a emergency firefighting. Once again, you have the question, the compliance category, the applicable, things like that. But from this point, I would go into the compliance definition. I have different types of tasks that I set up. One's a report, one's an inspection, one's an audit. I can expand that list, and it provides me all the tasks that need to happen. Or I can go directly into that particular item. And when I select that safety for the inspections, what occurs, it basically populates this information and provides you, excuse me one second. It provides you the audit type. And this to kind of give you a back end from if this is an inspection or if this is an audit. Depending on what audit type, there are questions behind the scene. So in other words, based on what I have selected, based on the location, based on the category, here's the audit that you're going to be selected. So that person would come in here and he could be out in the field. He could have a tablet, or he could have his Android or an iPhone, and basically look at this information. So one, he can see the audit type, when it was going to start, and it's even if there's a yes or no, or if it's a compliant type of thing saying not applicable or observation, we can do some type of scoring. So you basically provide a score list of those items that they're going to select from. So in other words, if I open this up, like I said, whether it's a mobile device or on the browser, you're basically making those selections. If you want to, there's different ways. You see the reoccurrences. So if I schedule this, let's say I only want it to be rescheduled if the audit has failed or that inspection has been failed. And that way later on is, remember when I showed that KPI screen, which says how many times this branch or this plant failed and what were the questions that failed. You can easily, as a manager, determine where those failures are and then kind of correct those, whether you're doing a corrective and preventive action, where those failures are, or things that you might need to dig into. And then you can add some additional actions that occur as well. One of the things I wanted to point out too is it's always that uniform, the absolute look that we have, but we always have these icons over here too. So maybe I need to notify somebody about certain criteria, like check again. I'll just make it very generic. I can easily notify that person, and that would be sent to them via the portal. When he logs in, he would be able to see what has been asked of him. Or I can do additional attachments based on that audit. Hey, I'm out here, I'm looking at this information, take a snapshot. I could add that particular item in here. For example, I don't have anything, but let's just say it's this one right here. Now this adds, and you can put your description in here and then add that in there. Basically what that's happening is at any point that you might get audited, you would have all that in the one record. Also, I have from an audit standpoint, I can go back anytime and see any clicks or any type of action anybody took. I have that information right here readily available to me. If I don't have access to it, meaning if I'm not an administrator, I would have these asterisks saying, you don't have rights to see this particular item, but your managers or the administrator would have access to that. And that's pretty much it from a compliance management standpoint. Adam, I'm going to turn it back over to you unless there's other questions that need to be asked.
Okay, thank you, Michael.
Absolutely.
And now I think we can open this up to the Q&A. So feel free to unmute or drop some questions in the chat.
Hi guys, April here.
Hey,
I
April.
don't hi. I don't have a question. As I'm joining this webinar for maybe the third time, just to keep on top of everything that's going on, because I do intend to use the system in the future. So I'm really impressed with everything that y'all have going on for this particular application, and I think it'll be really useful for my site.
Thank you, April.
Thank you, April.
Now that you spoke up, April, one of the things I didn't touch upon is when you have your compliance management, there's a little bit of difference on what you see from a compliance environment versus a compliance safety. So from a compliance environment, sometimes you would have different metrics and boxes to fill out, and based on those criteria, other things occur in what you have seen in the past, but just know that that's there. But thank you for those kind words.
Thank you guys.
Yeah, and looks like we had a comment. Can our engineering firm or third-party consultant input specific compliance requirements we need to track? And the answer to that is yes. We can either ingest via a secondary API. If your engineering firm has their own proprietary software and they have a REST or JSON API, we can connect to their metrics, but also we can have the ability to grant limited access to consultants in the system, so they would only be able to see what they're inputting for the compliance requirement and their compliance tasking. So if there are additional modules that you have within the TenForce platform, we would have them isolated to what they can actually see based on their user rights. So thank you for that question. And another question, can we tailor compliance tasks to match our internal processes instead of having to fit into a fixed workflow? So the answer to that is yes. TenForce is a very complex action management system that can be tailored to specific workflows. We can have various form fields configured by a high-level administrator or a super user, and we can grant you the ability to adapt the system as needed. If you need some help manipulating the platform, our engineers are available to assist as needed.
Adam, I think there's a question on
Right.
can personnel complete a task or inspections on a mobile and in the field? And basically, I'll
Yes.
answer. Okay, yeah.
Yes. Basically, that is the entire point of this solution. We have people that are working, whether it be uh, the engineers, it could be somebody working off at another location, and they need to be able to convey the requirements, or at least, from my experience, the people in the field may not necessarily need to fully understand the level of the requirement. They just need to know how to perform their individual task and ensure that it is completed. Uh, that's basically what the tutorial is for. We can provide documentation in the field. So if you have work instructions that on how to complete the task, we can provide those work instructions. The field workers can upload pictures, comment on the pictures themselves, and we can also upload videos. So if you're doing like a method 22 visual inspection, we can take a short video of that, of what the operator sees, so that way we can provide that as evidence later. So, all right. Do we have anything else? Well, I would like to thank everyone for joining today. We look forward to seeing you out in the field, and feel free to reach out if you have anything. Feel free to visit the TenForce library for additional webinars and more information on the TenForce offering. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful day.